Can you get smoother, more cinematic and better DJI Mini 3 Pro videos by adjusting the advanced gimbal settings? I really think so. Let me show you what I think are the best DJI Mini 3 Pro advanced gimbal settings for cinematic footage. I'm going to go through each setting, what it does and why you should use it to get better videos with this drone. Let's jump right in. So what are advanced gimbal settings and why should you adjust them? So the advanced gimbal settings in the DJI Fly app allow you to change how the drone reacts movement-wise and gimbal-wise to an input on the joysticks or gimbal wheel on the controller. For example, if you have some of the settings high, then the drone will rotate fast whenever you move the joystick, or you can lower them values so that the drone actually rotates slower for the same input on that joystick. And the same goes for the gimbal. You can change for any input on the scroll wheel how quickly that gimbal moves up and down. The other thing you can do is change something called smoothness. Now if the smoothness has a low value, the gimbal or the drone will come to a dead stop. But if the smoothness has a high value, the drone will actually buffer the movement out or the gimbal movement out. So when you let go of the stick, it will actually keep going for a few seconds and slow down itself to give you a much smoother movement. Now the reason I think you should change these is because the drone comes loaded with values which are generically the best for everybody. Some people like to control the smoothness of the drone by making really subtle movements on the sticks, and they also have really high sensitivity levels in their fingers and can make them small, nuanced movements and can smooth the motion out themselves. Same with the scroll wheel. But you also find some people, and I'm included in this bracket, who find it much harder to hold their fingers in them nuanced movements for a long time. I actually find, especially with my left thumb, that holding the stick in certain motions, I actually start to get like a twitch in my thumb, and I find it really hard to keep the stick in certain positions. So you can actually numb the values down if you're that kind of person, so that you can make harsher movements on the stick, but the drone will still move really nice and slowly in the sky, allowing you to get that cinematic motion. Or if you're someone who has high sensitivity in your fingers or the scroll wheel control, then you can actually bring the values down so that the drone is much more responsive to them inputs and you have much more control over that movement yourself. I hope that makes sense and you can see why changing them values can really help you get smoother shots whenever you're out flying to individually as a flyer, because we all move the joysticks differently. We all have different preferences when it comes to the joysticks, and we all have different capabilities into how well we can maneuver the joysticks themselves, and that goes for the scroll wheel as well. And lastly, the nice thing is you can change these values for the different modes. So you can have a super fast, super responsive drone in sport mode, and you can have a really quite numb, slow, smooth, dreamy-like control in cine mode, which is what you want in cine mode for cinematic shots. So what are the best advanced gimbal settings? So after flying the DJI Mini 3 Pro for a while now, I finally settled on what I think are the best advanced gimbal settings. I'm going to go through each one now, what they're set to, why I've set it that way, and what each setting does so that you can go out and refine them further for your own flying style. Now, top tip, one thing I recommend is whenever you're adjusting these settings, or this actually goes for updating firmware as well, your drone is turned on but it is not in the air. Try not to put it in a sunny area where the sun is shining on it. Try to put it in a shady area. The reason I highly recommend you do that is the drone is passively cooled by the air. So the drone, whenever you turn it on, expects to be in the air flying with cold air blowing through it, going into its vents. There's a huge vent behind the gimbal, there's vents underneath, and that's what normally keeps the drone cool. Whenever it's stationary on the ground doing firmware updates, or if you're taking a while tweaking the advanced gimbal settings, the drone can get really quite hot. So I recommend you keep it out of the sun. Inside, what I'm actually doing is I'm going to put it down, turn it on, and have a fan on a low setting, just blow air onto it just to keep it cool, because I have found it does get really quite warm whenever it's stationary for a long period of time. So that's just a top tip. Okay, so let's now take a look at the settings. Press the settings button on the top right of the DJI Fly app, go to control, and scroll down to advanced gimbal settings. So the first settings you'll see are for normal mode. Now, normal mode I do actually use quite a lot when getting cinematic video. I find if the drone's up high, cine mode is sometimes too slow, and so I use normal mode to get a sense of motion in my video clips. And so I've geared these settings towards that. Pitch speed, I have at 15. I believe this is the default value and the only one I haven't actually changed. I think 15 is actually perfect. The pitch speed relates to the gimbal rotation speed, so how quickly the gimbal will move up and down when you move the scroll wheel. And I find 15 to be perfect for that. Pitch smoothness. Now I love the smoothness setting across normal, sport and cine, and you'll see I have these values dialed quite high throughout my settings. And what this is when you let go of the stick, if this value is really low, the gimbal will just stop. If this value is really high, when you let go of the stick, it will buffer the movement out and smoothly come to a stop. And this is really helpful because I know myself, I find it really hard to come off the sticks really gently and really hard to come off the scroll wheel gently. And sometimes this results in jerky video. And so by having these values quite high, the drone actually does a lot of that smoothing for me, which is fantastic. I don't know why you wouldn't have this up quite high in my opinion. So for pitch smoothness, I have that set to 20. It means in normal mode, when I come off the scroll wheel, the movement will buffer and come to a nice gradual stop. And this is really important if you're gimbaling up to the horizon, for example. You don't want it to come to a dead stop. You want it to smooth that motion out. So 20 for pitch smoothness. Yaw rotation speed. So that's the left-right rotation of the drone. In normal mode, I have this set to 60. I think this is just the right amount for normal mode. It is enough to be cinematic in its movement, but also not so slow that the drone doesn't take ages to turn around, because at the end of the day, this is normal mode, it's not cine mode, and you want to have some mobility in the drone. So I find 60 is perfect for that. And yaw smoothness, again, this is when you let go of the sticks, the drone will buffer that rotation out. And again, for cinematic video, this is really important. If you're not very good at smoothing that rotation out, having this quite high is helpful, so I have that set to 20. Sport mode. Now I only ever use sport mode for getting into location really quick. So I put the drone up, I flick it into sport mode, and I whiz that drone over to where I want to take video from. I never really, if ever, use sport mode for taking video clips. There are some unique scenarios where it does make sense to use it, but 9 times out of 10, I'm not recording cinematic clips in sport mode. So these settings are geared towards a really responsive drone, get it into location as quick as possible without using very much battery, and then flip it into either normal or cine to get your cinematic shots. So pitch speed I have at 50, so I can move that gimbal up and down really quickly to align it towards my subject. Pitch smoothness I have set at 10. This is just to allow there to be a slight buffer whenever you let go of the sticks for them unique scenarios where I do end up using it to record video. I don't see again why you would have smoothness not turned on. The only time that sometimes you don't really want it is if you try to stop on your subject, it can buffer past it slightly. But once you get used to that buffering motion, then you can factor for it whenever you're controlling it. So for pitch smoothness, I have it set to 10. Yaw rotation speed. In sport mode, this is super important to turn really quickly, to turn towards my subject as quick as possible. So I have it set to 150. And again, I have yaw smoothness set to 20, just so it buffers that movement out. I just don't see why you wouldn't have smoothness turned on. Like I say, in those really unique scenarios where I do actually use sport mode for video, it just helps smooth that motion out. Cine mode. So this is my primary mode for recording video. It's the smoothest mode for me. It's the slowest mode for me. And it's the mode where I just want the drone to be numb, so to speak. I don't want it to be super responsive. I want to be able to sometimes accidentally make harsh movements on the joysticks, and for that motion to be smoothed out to get a really dreamy-like movement with the drone. And so that's what this is geared to. So for pitch speed, I have it set to 10. That's really quite slow. So you'll get a really slow gimbal movement up and down when you control the scroll wheel. Pitch smoothness, I have set quite high at 25. If I accidentally let off the scroll wheel too quickly or take my finger off it and it just recenters really quickly, I know the gimbal will still smoothly come to a stop and save that video. Your rotation speed. So I don't do a lot of rotation when I'm doing cinematic movement. And so if I do, I want it to be really slow and really subtle. I actually find if you rotate the drone too quickly, you can actually get jerky video sometimes. So I want that to be a nice, slow movement. So I have yaw rotation speed set to 15, which is really quite slow. You're never going to use that speed if you're trying to turn the drone really quickly to turn it back, to fly back to you, or turn it really quickly to bring a subject into frame. You're going to use normal or sport for that. If you try doing it in cine mode with it set to 15, it will take forever. But for recording cinematic clips, it is perfect at this speed, I find. And yaw smoothness, 25. So when you let off the stick, you're going to get a really nice smooth motion as it comes to a stop. So those are my settings. I'm going to put a screenshot of each on the screen now, so you can pause the video, write them down, take a screenshot yourself, or even input them into the controller. So there you have it. That's what I think is the best advanced gimbal settings for getting smooth and cinematic footage with this drone. But hopefully now you understand what each one of those advanced gimbal settings does, so that you can tweak it to your own flying style to help you get better footage. Have you ever went in and adjusted the advanced gimbal settings, or is it something you've never touched in your drone? Let me know in the comments down below. Now before you go, if you've liked this video and you've learned something new and you find it helpful, please let me know by giving me the thumbs up and clicking that like button down below. And if you're new to drones or have been flying for a while and want to learn how to take better photos with your drone and get more cinematic videos, then I have a ton of other content on my channel to help you level up your drone game. If you want to see a few more of them videos now, here's a few I personally recommend. I'll not keep you back any further. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you over there.